This session is on classroom management. I'll just give you a little bit of my background. I had an undergraduate degree in psychology. I'm from Oregon. And with that degree, you don't do much. So I ended up working in residential treatment in a facility in Portland with 54 adjudicated adolescent boys. And I did that for 5 years. I was a counselor. Really found that I enjoyed working with kids with behavior problems, and so I became a teacher, and I was a special ed, self-contained EBD teacher for years. In my professional work now, I focus on strategies for preventing problem behaviors and strategies for dealing with problem behaviors. So I've got 2 sessions today, and the first one is really prevention of problem behaviors. So what I want to do is make a case first that nothing is foolproof. Nothing works with every kid, nothing works every time. But there are things that give you a better chance than other things, and so we want to play the odds. So I think of this as if we're gambling. And the gamble is we want this kid to, or these kids, to stay successful, to be engaged with what we're doing, to be achieving and to be maintaining their behavior. So if I said to you, we're going to do that with this kid in this class, and if that kid is able to be engaged, achieve, and have no behavior problems, you get $1 million. There'd be things you'd want that teacher to do in that room. You wouldn't say, I just do whatever, because you know some things work better than others. So I'm going to stay focused today on high probability things. But I again want to remind you that nothing's a sure thing. Just because it's the highest probability thing we have doesn't mean it'll work for every kid. But we should always start with what's the best chance. And if that doesn't work, we can go to something else. But it doesn't make any sense to say, well, this one hardly ever works, let's try it first. And the reason that doesn't make sense is because every single time we try something and fail with it with a kid, we actually decrease the probability of a future success. There becomes a point in a kid's life where they've had so many failures that statistically speaking, it's really unlikely we'll turn it around much. And that's sad to say, but that's what we know. So we don't want failures. We're going to do everything we can to create a success. Failures are going to happen. But if we can create more successes, we can kind of inoculate them against that. So I'm going to have you think about this today in these terms. Let's say this doorway here is the doorway to a middle school classroom that you've never seen, but it's a middle school classroom. Inside this middle school classroom are, let's say, 25 middle school kids. We're going to take this brand new teacher that I've got standing right here. He or she just graduated. They've got a teaching certificate. We're going to open that door, we're going to kick them in there, and we're going to lock the door behind them. And we're going to make them stay in there for a week. Here's the bet. I have all of your money. I have your retirement. I have the mortgage to your house. I have everything you've ever had. I own it, and I'm betting it for you. You can either lose it all or double it. You double it, you're retiring at the end of the week. You lose it all, you start over. I want you to think in terms of the stakes being incredibly high. Here's the bet. We can't go into that room and help that teacher. They don't allow us to do that. We can only watch from afar. So let's pretend like you're in a sports book watching this and gambling on it, but you're not watching football, you're watching this classroom. If the kids in that classroom are on task 80% of the time throughout the week, basically doing what they're supposed to, and nobody needs to be kicked out of that room during the week, you have won a doubling of your entire life. You now have 4 cars instead of 2. You've got 2 houses, and your retirement is giant. Of course, if these things don't happen, you have nothing. You're destitute. You're living on the street. So, if the stakes are that high, and you've got 30 seconds before that teacher goes in the room when we lock the door, what are you going to tell them? You're going to beg and plead with them about something. Please. And when I ask this, it seems to me like the what do I want to tell them? There's so many things. I kind of end up gravitating toward the don'ts. Don't do this. Don't, because those are easier to think of really fast, I think. But what we want isn't like one thing. There's not a magic teacher thing. Oh, if you do this, everything will work. It's a whole bunch of things. And in terms of instruction, I covered a lot of that in the thing I did yesterday. Today we're going to talk just in terms of the management of the classroom. If we could maximize your potential to win that bet, what are the things we'd want to see going on in that classroom? And don't forget about him. You all know him. Just because it works for the classroom doesn't mean it's going to work for him. You could have a classroom filled with angels and you don't need to do any management, but if that kid's there, it's going to screw the whole thing up for you. So when we talk about classroom management, it's easy to think, well, our kids don't need that. But there's a good chance one of them does, and we don't always know up front who that is. So let's use good practice across the board from the get-go. That's the way we'll think about this. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to teach them what we want them to do. And when we talk about instruction as prevention, we want to think about these things. What do you want the kids to do? And take that back and think about that just a little differently. What would a successful kid look like? That's what your rules are. So we want to think in terms of during the day, the things we do, the places we go, the activities we have. What do my successful kids look like? Those are the behaviors that we want to teach. So one part of instruction is the rules. But the rules are really your curriculum. So if you were teaching math, the rules are the math. A plus sign means add. You got all these rules. But that doesn't mean your instruction's done. And I think sometimes people think, if I've got the rules and I say, sit down, shut up, and listen to me say the rules, we've taught the rules. But that doesn't work in math. You don't just bring all the kids in on the first day in algebra and go, this is every principle and rule you're going to need to know in algebra this year. Shut up and listen. Okay, you don't need me the rest of the year. Go do algebra. But that's the way we've approached behavior. The bigger part of instruction are the routines, the arrangements, the tricks, the way you say things, the way you engage kids, the activities, all of those pieces. So when we start talking about classroom management, the first thing I like to talk about is teaching. And I would say there's a really big difference between telling somebody something and teaching somebody something. It takes no special training to come in and read off a list of rules. Anybody can do that. Teachers do things that raise the probability of kids being successful with that list of things. And so I'm going to spend a whole lot of my time today talking about the bottom part. Like, we know there are rules, we're going to talk a little bit about that, but how should you move through the room? When should you talk and how should you talk to kids? What kinds of things could you do to maximize probabilities in your favor for that bet? That's where we're going to go with this. So let's start off with good rules and bad rules. When we teach kids what we want them to do, we are teaching something. But you'll notice if you go into a typical school and walk around that a lot of the rules are, don't do this. It's not good instruction. I don't know where this sign came from. I found it on the internet. It's ridiculous. But I think it's kind of the same, equally illogical as the one on the right. I know that there are kids in the school that know every one of those rules. We're not supposed to hit, we're not supposed to kick, we're not supposed to push, we're not supposed to, but they do it. Why? It works. Someone's making fun of you, getting in your face, calling you names. If you punch them, they'll generally stop. We don't really have a problem with kids not knowing that's wrong. We have a problem with not telling them how to do it differently. How should you handle it when someone does this. So just telling kids not to do something doesn't tell them what to do. It'd be like if I taught math by saying, everyone listen, 2 plus 2 is not 5. Okay, let's go. What is it? Is it any other number or is it something specific? So we want to make sure that our classroom rules teach kids what to do. And again, go back to, what does a successful kid look like? That's what we should be teaching kids. And we want to show them, we want to model it, we want to have a discussion, we want to practice it, we want to bring it all back to effective instruction. As we continue with that logic, we would like to have 3 to 5 big ideas. And if you do anything with PBIS, you'll recognize this logic. Here's where that came from. Way back when PBIS was in its infancy, say like the mid-early 90s, and I was a part of a group of people at the University of Oregon that were kind of creating what they call the blueprint. The idea was, how do we know what effective instruction looks like for behavior? And we all agreed it's the same as academics. Okay, well then let's create the mirror. But what we were finding is when we go into schools and say, come up with your rules and expectations, they'd have 85 behavior rules. And kids can remember 3 to 5. So they get lost really quickly. And one of the people in this group with us, Ed Kameanui, I remember him saying, well, you know, you guys are teaching a list of rules. When we teach reading or math, we teach big rules. They call them big ideas. Like, we don't teach every math problem you could ever come upon. We teach you rules for solving. We don't teach you every word in the dictionary. We teach you rules for solving. And we call this anchored instruction. You got to have an anchor to hold these ideals or principles. And so the concept here was schools, come up with anchors. If they're be responsible, be respectful, be safe. You know, a lot of schools are just respect yourself, respect others, respect property. But that's what you teach. What does it mean to respect others? It means you treat other people the way you'd want them to treat you. So what would that look like if it was a crowded hallway? What kinds of things would you think might bother people or might bother you? So what could we do to make sure that doesn't happen? I've done this with kids a million times, and you can get a kid to give you exactly the answer you want if you keep crafting the question. We should always walk and keep our hands and feet to self. Oh man, that is a great idea. I already knew what the rule was going to be, but I'm teaching it. I'm making them engage with it and come up with it. And so what we have found is if you go into a school and you randomly walk through the hall and ask a kid what the rules are, if they are not in a school that has big idea anchors, they don't know what the rules are, but they'll tell you what's really obvious. So I walk up to this kid and say, hey, I'm just doing a survey here. What are the rules in the hallway? They'll get this blank look on their face and then they'll go, no fighting? Of course no fighting. Where is fighting allowed in the school? So to me that says, I don't know. It's like if I said, hey, what's 2 plus 2? Not 100. You wouldn't go, you're going to do well on that test today. You'd say, she has no idea. And that's what I get out of the kids that say, no fighting. However, in our PBIS schools that are at Fidelity, we go in and we ask that question, and the kids, I will say their eyes kind of roll back in their head and they robotically say, respect self, others' property. I really don't care about that. What I care about is when I say, well, what's that look like? And they go, oh, well, we stay to the right. We found in our research that when you've anchored it, which is effective instruction, kids can tell you more things that are positive and more things, period. All we've done is created a mnemonic device. That's really what these anchors are. I think we want that then to go right into the classroom. So if you're in a PBIS school, you're going to have the same 3 rules in your classroom, or 4 or whatever you've got. But you'll have to teach what they mean in your classroom. So we all know, respect each other, treat each other the way we want them to treat us. So in the hallway, we've all talked about this and this. What about when we're getting a drink in here? And you're going to have to think out, where in my classroom do I need to teach specific rules? I mean, day by day sitting at your desks, sure, we want you to raise your hand, etc. We're going to have things that whatever you want for your class, that's not a necessary rule, but whatever you want. But you're going to have those places. What about when we line up? What about when we're getting a drink? What about when you're sharpening a pencil? There are those moments as a teacher that are prone to problems. And so we're going to want to specifically talk to kids about those places. And again, I want you to make a distinction between what I'm describing as a teaching and just saying, here are the rules for the pencil sharpener, which again, I wouldn't call teaching. I could just get anybody off the street to come in and yell that at kids. That doesn't necessarily increase their probability of success with that. So as we go into your classroom rules, anchor them. Every rule that you have should have been discussed, modeled, demonstrated back and forth with kids. Don't have a rule that you've not done that with. Again, if it's important enough to be a rule, it's important enough to have been taught. Organize them in ways that make them easier. And that's like I said, you can do that by location. I found school-wide it's easier to do by location. Inside the classroom, it's easier to do by context. Group instruction, lineups, getting a drink, need to go to the bathroom. These are situations more than locations for the classroom. Once you've taught them, keep revisiting them. So I like to think about the modeling goes on all year, but I start the modeling and you keep it up. So when I say, Kevin, thank you so much for being responsible, everybody heard that? That's another model. So I show it the first time, but I get to keep calling it out when I see it.
So when you do that, do you say, just thanks for being responsible? Do you give the example?
I would give the example of exactly what you did. So we just shot some little vignettes of this last weekend, and the examples we were given would be, Kevin, you really sharpened your pencil efficiently and got right back. That's very responsible. So I'm linking it back to the anchor, but I'm also giving what we'd call behavior-specific praise, where I tell you exactly what you did. But every time I give you that behavior-specific praise, I link it back to the anchor again. So we want them to know why that was something that was good to do. The other thing that we know about is the fact that if you don't have a place to put that, if I just come over and say, good job sharpening your pencil fast, and we've never talked about why that would be important, what kids will do is just lose that. It's like, boy, he's in a good mood today, and they don't really know why it happened, and it doesn't go anywhere. So we want them to put that in their brain as, oh yeah, that's another example of me doing that well. So it has to be specific in order to stick for them. Let's go to routines and schedules. There isn't a big research base per se on these things. There's a logic. And in my time as a teacher with challenging kids, I learned some things about this. And again, I'm going to present this more as a logic than as a research. But on the first one, we have a ton of research. Consistency is crucial. The more you do the same things in the same order, in the same way on a daily basis, the more you can predict success from kids. What you're doing is building a habit. And yeah, as the year goes by, you want kids to be able to think and go broader, but when we start out, we want to have consistency. Now, the question is, how consistent do I need to be? And the answer is, I don't know. But here would be my guess. You need to be as consistent as that kid in your class who needs consistency. It's hard to be consistent for one kid and not the class. So if you've got one kid in your class that needs a lot of consistency, you're probably going to need to build your routines much tighter across the whole class. Now, obviously, when we're talking about kids with autism, that consistency is crucial. They will flip out if things aren't exactly, and that's why we've got tight schedules with pictures and things to keep them knowing where we are. I don't think your average kid needs that much consistency, but again, you're going to have to build it some way, somehow. What I like to do, and I found this the hard way. So my first job ever as a teacher, I had 8 14 to 18-year-old adjudicated boys in a lockdown facility. I'd been working with kids like that for 5 years before I got my teacher certificate. I didn't think this was that big a deal. But one thing I realized is that when you're in the counselor position, you're just doing whatever you do. When you get in the classroom, you want them all to do something, and that's a lot harder. It was easy to say, stay seated when you're watching the movie, but I want you to get out your math book and we're all going to do math. That's a lot harder to get compliance with. And I found that when I would say things like, okay, let's see, it's 9:40, let's get out your math books. Because they thought I was making this up as we go, it was ripe for negotiation. You know, like, no, how about we'll do math later after we go outside? And how about we'll do math, but only if you let us do it. And it's like, who told you this was a negotiation? And it was just that way every day, this argument. And then I started doing this. I just put it on the board, and we did it that way every day. And I kept to the times. So remember, these are big, matured teenage kids. And I would say, okay, 9:40, let's see. Let me think of a different time. Okay, 9:30, let's see. Math. And they'd go, oh, and I go, yeah, no, I don't want to either, but it's 9:30. The schedule says we have to. And because we had done it so repetitively, I've got big, tough kids going, damn schedule, and throw their books out and start opening it up. And I'm like, I know, I hate the schedule too, but it wasn't me, it was the schedule. And I could make them stop negotiating and being angry with me, but it really, really depended upon me starting it on time and ending it on time. Part of that was me telling them what we're going to do. We're only doing 2 pages. Because if you don't say we're only doing 2 pages, when you get done with 1 page and you go, let's do another, it's like a mutiny. But if you tell them ahead of time, it's only 2, and when you get finished with number 1, you go, we're half done. Downhill now, 1 more. And they know it's coming. But it's all about they know it's coming, they know how long, and it's a habit. And consistency builds that. Now, do you need this in your classroom? I don't know. Again, you have to decide how much do I need of this structure to make it work. With the kids I worked with, we needed that kind of structure to keep things together. So for everything on this schedule, there should be a set of expectations that we teach. So when I say we're walking to lunch, you know it means these things. When I say it's time for independent work, you know it's going to look like this, and you'll be expected to do this because I've taught that and I remind them every day. Reminders are the cheapest thing we have to give us a big effect. It's not cheating on your bet to remind kids. That's enhancing your bet. It's playing the odds. Consider on your schedule how long kids could do these things before it would stop working with your kids. So if you think of the kids you've got in your class and we said, we're going to do sustained silent reading, how long could that go before somebody murders somebody? And I don't say the murder part, but how long will that go before it breaks down completely? And I'll ask people and they'll say 20 minutes. And I'll say, well, how long is your sustained silent reading? 30 minutes. Well, that's just a bad idea. You're telling me I know it will break down under these circumstances and I'm going to do those circumstances. Why? And I've had people say, principal said we had to go 30 minutes. I'm not saying don't do sustained silent reading. I'm saying break it up. Go 10 minutes, stop. Say, what are you reading? That sounds interesting. What are you reading? Anybody else ever read that? I can't wait to hear what happens next. Go another 10 minutes. But don't make kids do something to the point where you know it's going to blow up. It's just a bad bet. So think about each of those pieces. How long can you get what you need? And if you need an hour of something, think about either breaking it up or varying the activities within it. So it's you alone, us as a group, you alone, us as a group. If you're trying to get them to do the same thing for a longer period, the probabilities go down. Mix it up as you go. And by the way, the research on that isn't really just kid research. We've got pretty good evidence that all of these things are the same for adults. And so I like to think about this in the same way I think about going to a meeting at the university. There's nothing in my weekly calendar that's more aversive than sitting in a meeting. When I go to that meeting, what makes it worse is no agenda. Because it feels to me like it's just people blabbering on. I keep thinking, if you'd shut up, we'd be done with this meeting. I want an agenda. And I don't know why I find this so reinforcing, but checking those things off. Ha! Done with that one. That's really no different than what we're talking about for kids here, is I know what we got to do to be done. It's far less aversive when you feel like you've got some control. Physical arrangements. Where do you put your furniture? Where do you stand? How do you organize kids? These are all things that we can play with. Now, when you talk about proximity and movement, when I taught, again, 8 kids, and so I'm in the room the whole time because it didn't work to talk from the front, but I've only got 8 kids. I go in classrooms now and look, there's 30 kids, and there you can't put a piece of paper between them. How is the adult going to walk around? They can't a lot of times. And we did a set of trainings like this for bus drivers, and the first thing that came up was, I can't ever get out of my seat. And I'm like, oh yeah, we can't do proximity. But then it occurred to me, eye contact is like proximity. So if I can't move around next to you, I'm going to make eye contact with you as often as I can. And here's what I mean by eye contact. I can see your eyes, and your eyes can see my eyes seeing your eyes. There's no secret about it. We are looking right at each other. And I'm doing this with all of you as often as I can. So my first thought for proximity is head on a swivel, looking while I walk. So I developed, and I will admit before going further that I have a well-developed sense of paranoia that you don't and probably don't need to have. But I learned in my teaching career that if I'm walking a straight line past her, she's thinking of when's my chance to do something that I'm trying to get away with. And if she knows I'm walking a straight line, she's going, now's my chance, because he's walking a straight line. So I learned that you don't walk straight lines. You shift and move and spin while you're walking. So I'm always doing this. How's it going, you guys? How's this group doing? And so they can never predict when they're going to be away. I call this the 1 second rule, which means kids can never believe that there will be more than 1 second before I could see them again. It might be 5 seconds, it might be more, but it could be 1. And so you can't get away with whatever you're wanting to get away with. So the whole time I've been talking this morning, Lindsay's not been paying attention because she's been thinking about slugging Kevin in the side of the head. The only reason she hasn't done that is I haven't given her an opportunity. And this is a big principle, I think, of instruction, is you set kids up to be successful. It's all me and the way I did this. I'm going to give her the credit for it. So here comes me giving Lindsay the credit for my eye contact. Lindsay, we've been talking a lot about hands to self, and you have really been working hard at it. I really have noticed. I appreciate how good you're doing. Thank you so much. Now, all of you who know Lindsay are going, come on. She would have slugged him in a second if you'd have given her a chance, but I didn't give her a chance. And what we know is by telling her she did well with that, it statistically increases the probability of a success next time. That doesn't mean, so now I don't need to look at Lindsay anymore. This is not fixed. But every time we create a success and give that success back to the kid, we create a higher probability of them maintaining it. That's what teaching is. It's what we do when we teach reading or math. Get these little bitty pieces that are successful, make a big deal, and then add on. And that's what we're doing here. So I'm just going to try to keep that in mind. But what if, and this happens, you guys keep working. I've got to go get some papers out of my filing cabinet that for some reason I keep behind this curtain. When I go back here, what's Lindsay thinking? This is a golden opportunity from heaven. It could never happen again. I have to take advantage of this and do the slug in the head right now. So if I know that's what Lindsay's prone to do, I have to think ahead. I cannot go in there while we're in this situation. What if I absolutely have to do it? Then I say, I'm going to need a helper. Lindsay, you're having a good morning, come help me. And all I'm doing is not giving her an opportunity to fail. And so it requires, clearly, thought about everything you do and every kid in your room all the time. Constantly thinking. And I don't like to say it like this, but my mindset is constantly, what could go wrong? What could go wrong next? What could go wrong? Get in the way of it. Don't let it go wrong, because when you don't let it go wrong, you get to say, wow, I'm impressed with this group. I'm giving the credit back to the kids for every one of those pieces. Furniture. I'm asked often, where should the teacher's desk be? Again, there's no research on this. But I would say, one, when you're teaching, you're probably not sitting at your desk a lot, but you're going to sit there sometimes, and so this would be my logical rule. When you're seated at your desk, you should be able to, with only a movement of your neck, catch the eyeballs of every kid in the room. Now, I've had people say, no, I put mine at the back so they don't know if I'm looking at them. I want them to know I'm looking at them. I don't want them spending the day going, where is he? What's he doing? I want them to barely look up and go, yep, he's looking. Because if they know that easily, that quickly, yep, he's looking, they'll stop worrying about it. So I want eye contact when I'm sitting there. Their desks, we're going to go through a whole bunch of arrangements here in a second. But I'll tell you, I am a big advocate for assigned seats. And here's why. I can control probabilities for on and off task, probabilities for peer relations, probabilities for all kinds of things simply by placing certain kids in certain chairs. That's a pretty easy fix. The hard part is getting kids to go along with it. And here's the trick. I will warn you up front, this requires lying to the kids, but what you do is you say, come on in. Up here on the board is a map of our classroom. Find the chair with your name on it and go sit there. And here comes the lie. This is completely random. I just made this up so that you could sit next to different people. And then you have to say this, I'll be changing it all the time. And you will, but it isn't random. You'll be changing it as you see need. And the kids will about this. No, you need to sit next to different people and have different experiences, so I'll be moving you around. It's purely random though. So I set this up, it's going, but then I realize this was a bad combo here, table in the middle. What I really, really try to avoid is making any movements during class, because it becomes way longer and more arduous and they're going to argue. And I'm not saying I won't do it, but what I will do instead, if I see a problem grouping, is I'll start using proximity. So instead of moving around the room, I'm going to teach class for most of this period standing right here, because you guys got that right. Good job. And I'm just not going to let it happen. Use my proximity. Then here's what happens next time you come into class. Hey, you guys, last night I thought, what the heck? Let's mix it up. I flipped some coins and it just randomly moved people. So look up here and see where you sit now. And I've had people go, that's weird. The only thing different is Kevin's sitting over there. And I go, yeah, I know, totally random. That's the way it happens. And to keep that going, what I'll do is we'll go over here and find Jessica. Everybody knows Jessica's the perfect student and the perfect kid, never has any problems. A couple days from now, I'm going to come in and go, flip some coins last night. Looks like Jessica moved. That just totally fools everybody. Now the next day, I can go right to you and say, you know what, Carrie, I flipped a coin last night, and actually your chair moved over to there. And Carrie's like, that's not fair. Not fair. It's a flipped coin. It could happen again tomorrow. I'm just randomly doing everybody. Jessica had to move. And I'm again not saying this is foolproof, but I can pretty much put kids wherever I want without having a big fight about it, because I've created them not being about you. But if I go in and say, your behavior is such that, oh, that wasn't me, Kevin started that, I don't want to have this discussion. I want this just to be a purely random thing we do. Let's look at the idea of moving, and I've got a couple of videos here. So the idea here is this kid is at the back of the room and he's just not doing anything. And so I'm going to move him up front because I can't go stand back there. I'm playing the teacher in this. So I give people this bet. If he agrees to come up there with me, you get $10,000. I'm going to give you two options. Here they are. Hey, you're not getting anything done up front. Or the other option. Hey, I want to show you something. It's really cool. Come up here. Bring your book. Neither one's foolproof. If you had 10,000 writing on the kids saying yes, which would you want the teacher to do? But go into classrooms, that isn't the way people address kids when they want something. Your probabilities break down completely. So what I want to do is I want to get him up front. I then want to reteach. Here was the task. You got to do this, you got to do this. Watch this. Here's how you do it. Show me. You can do this. But while I'm doing that, if it was Jessica, I'm not standing like this with Jessica. I'm standing like this because I don't want to put my back to the class for an extended time. And again, I know my paranoia higher than it needs to be for you. But I'm going to put myself in the place where while we're talking, I'm still darting my eyes around every once in a while. So I'm always thinking about how I place myself when doing that.
Jimmy has difficulty remaining on task during independent work. He is falling behind because he's not completing his work.
Hey, Jimmy, come here. I want to show you something. Bring your stuff. I got your book. Come up here. I want to show you how to do this. It's really simple. Excellent work, guys. Thank you. Hey, you know how to do this, man. This is really simple. Look, 3 steps. Read the problem, find the match over here, and then write the match down. So look at this first one. So you read that. Where's the match over here? Show me. Yeah, exactly. Now what I do is write that down. So write that down right there for me. Perfect. Yeah. Go ahead and do the next one.
The teacher has considered how to place Jimmy in a way
Excellent,
that allows
guys.
more
We're almost
frequent
done. You guys are
contact.
going to have this done.
To make this work,
some
the
free
teacher will
time.
also keep moving while keeping an eye out for
Yeah,
Jimmy.
exactly. You can do this.
In
Keep
addition,
going.
the teacher is explicit with Jimmy, showing him what he needs to do and providing frequent reminders.
Have some free time. Let me see. So let's look at some classrooms. The yellow stars represent problem behaviors. So there are some kids here that are predictable in their problems. It could be that they're close enough to each other that they get each other having problems. But they're not right near me. So this is what I think people tend to think they need to do. They tend to think they need to put all of those kids along the front row. I would argue keeping them together is a bad idea, 1. 2, I don't want to absolutely segregate these kids by putting them on, you have to be in the bad row. I think it sets them up to think that's who I am. So what I want to do is I want to mix them up. I want to put them throughout the classroom, but I'm placing them somewhere, whereas I'm typically standing by my computer. I'm going to put them somewhere where from that point I can walk directly to them. So I would do this. So 1, I would like to walk through the room and be able to, I'm not going to do this necessarily, be able to put my hand on the desk of every kid. That red line is how many steps I'd have to take, the pattern I'd have to take in a room in rows to do that. And I love teaching in rooms with rows, so I'm not trying to say you shouldn't do this, but if you're going to teach with a room in rows and walk through the room, you're not going to walk through as often because it takes a lot longer to do. And that means there's more time between times when you've had an interaction. So you have to think about who your kids are as you set this up. But the yellow lines, notice that I could keep on talking and walk straight to where I wanted to be and keep on talking. So I can now be standing here talking from the book and giving examples. But if this kid is sitting way back here in the northwest, I'm going to have to serpentine through the room to get there, and it's more obvious and it's harder, and there's backpacks on the floor and you got to step over things. And so I'm trying to find direct routes to get to kids. Here's another. I hate this room arrangement as a teacher. The long table that goes all the way across and you cannot get to anybody in the back. These are like middle and high school generally, actually university too, although not so worried about behavior management when I'm teaching at the university. But I've got kids that want to sit in the back. That's where they'll go, or in the middle, because I can't really walk past them. If you know this classroom, you know chairs and backpacks are clogged in here. You can't walk through there. So it gives them an island where they can go, and I can't walk by and give a whisper or a hint or a correction. So this is what I do with this classroom. Just move it around a little bit. There's the same number of seats in this room. But my ability to walk in here changes everything. My ability to get in there, and it might be that if a kid that was having trouble sat right here, I can't put my hand right on the desk, but I could be close. But what I'm going to do is assign seats again. And when I assign seats, now I can make sure those kids are places where I can walk directly to them. But those kids don't have to know that's why they're there. There's one kid way in the back. But I've still got an easy way to get over there when I need to say something. So I'm just thinking out how to raise my probabilities. Groupings of 4. Probably at elementary, this is the most common thing I see. So we've got space to move, but it's a little tight. There's not a lot to do with this, but the only thing I try to do with it is space it out a bit more. And by spacing it out, they're not right near every other group of 4, but it also creates some room for me to walk around. And basically, I take mini laps and bigger laps. The mini lap is through the early part of the circle, and I've got the kids that I think need me more are always on the inner part of the circle. I, every once in a while, walk around the whole circle. And if I were right here and decided I needed to talk to that kid, it's easy enough just to walk back there, and then I turn myself again so I can see the rest of the class, and I can talk to them and then go back to my circulating. The only thing about this is, and we're going to have this on the next one, is I would rather have these kids here than here. Because if they're here and sitting this way, while they're sitting there, we can have more opportunity for that direct eye contact that I want. When you put kids around something, somebody is really sitting with their back to the front a lot of the time, and I'm careful about who that might be. Which brings us to my favorite. This is my favorite. If I just took this middle table out and we did it this way, this is my favorite way to teach in a classroom. One, I talk a big game about really being systematic and walking through the room. The reality is once I get teaching, it all leaves my head and I'm just randomly wandering, which is what is perfect about this one. I wander randomly like that, but I'm always wandering by desks. And even if I'm right here, I mean, these would probably be a little closer. If I'm right here and here's something going on over there, I'm just like 1, 2, 3 steps from being here. Now the problem here is if I put the kids that I want to see most on the table on the inner circle, every one of them is seated with their back to me. That's a problem for me. If I put them where we were making eye contact all the time, I don't have proximity. So I want the proximity. So I found that this works way better for group type instruction than it does for me being the teacher and delivering instruction to them. So I taught this rule when I do this. Here's the signal. Come up with that signal. When you hear that, you turn your chair and face me. So, okay, Chair's facing me, everybody's looking at me. Okay, here's what we're doing. Now I've got eye contact while we do this. Okay, go back to your group. And they turn back in and I do my wandering again. But you have to kind of figure out where you need these new rules and strategies to keep the things that you know give you high probability. And so finally on this kind of arrangement proximity thing is, how do you deal with a problem? So again, here's my classroom. I'm wandering through and doing things, and great job. I really like the way I see you guys working. Nice job, you guys. I really think this is going well over here. How are you guys doing? And then I come back over here, and now all of a sudden this group is giggling and pushing things around, and they're not on task. Don't yell across the room to them. Middle table! Because everybody who is on task, that's a signal. Get off task and look at middle table. It could be interesting. I'm not going to drag everybody else off. Instead, what you do is you stop and you make direct eye contact. I call this the mom look, based upon my mom. Okay, so if they see me, the chill goes down their spine and they get back to work, and I just do this. Good job. I'm coming there. I'm not yelling across the room. I don't want anybody to know we just had this interaction. They all know what this means. I'm coming to you. So then what I do is I do work my way to them fairly soon. Working on, say, talk to this table a little bit, move around, come back. Hey, you guys made a great choice. Glad you're back on. Keep going. Really impressed. Keep moving. Hit and run. Keep hitting and running. Don't stop and spend a long time one place. You want to keep moving to all the tables, and especially when something's going wrong, the longer you stand here and stare, the more you prompt a kid with behavior problems to say something rude to you. I'm not going to give you a chance. I'm going to say, keep going. I'll be right back. Go somewhere else. Come back. Hit and run. Keep popping. Keep moving around as you do it. If you do that and they don't notice your eye contact or don't care, you do have to go directly to them. But don't like tip over furniture and just run. Casually, but directly. So I always think 4 seconds is how long I'm going to give you to notice this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Great work here, guys. Keep it going. I really like what I'm seeing over there. Proximity and my mom's look at you right now. Okay, now, very rarely do they ignore that. And if they do, we'd go on to the next step, which I'll describe in a second. But what I do is, when they look right at me, is I say, making a good choice? And they all kind of start doing something. I go, there's a good choice. Now here's what I'm thinking. How long could I be gone and still be able to say, you guys are still working? That's impressive. So I'm looking at this table, and I'm thinking, 7 seconds is the best I'm going to get out of this group. So I'm going to say, keep it going. I'll be back. I go over here. Like what I'm saying, anybody need any help here? Come back. You guys are still working. Wow, I'm really impressed. Keep that going. And I'm just going to keep doing that hit and run back and forth until it's going where I feel like I don't need to hit it as often. But that's all I'm doing, is setting you up for success, giving you a chance to be successful, coming back and telling you it was all you. And just pop, pop, pop. Now again, the more kids and tables you have in your room, the more challenging that is to be able to get to it. But that's part of that game, is how do I move quickly? How do I say what I need to? How do I keep it all going? Keep it all in pieces. Now, what if none of this worked? I looked there, I stopped here, I looked, I still get nothing. Then a question. Always start a confrontation with a question, because the probability of an escalation is much lower. The question needs to be genuine. So here's a genuine question. And I'll put this back on myself a lot of times just because I don't care. Hey guys, I was thinking, sometimes when I give the directions, I talk so fast and I wasn't sure that everybody heard because I didn't see everybody doing step 1. So does anybody here know what step 1 is? So I'm putting this back on me and I'm thinking, oh, I don't know. And I go, oh, I'm glad I asked because I talk so fast. So here it is. On step one, everybody needs to do this. So could you guys show me working on step one to make sure that I said that well? And they get working and I go, keep that going. I'm going to be right back. Boom, I'm gone. Sometimes I'll do that and I'll say, so I noticed a lot of people were on step one. Step two seems like, does somebody here know what step two is? Can anybody help out? That's genuine. I care about you. I'm concerned. Here's a question that's not genuine, and it won't work. Hey, what's everyone in the class doing except for you? That's just like sarcasm. And that's going to make any kid with a prone to behavior disorders is going to say something rude, and now you're going in a direction you don't want to go. If it happens, you're going to have to deal with it. What we're working on, though, is lowering that probability in the first place. So I'm going to hit and run again. Great, show me that. I'll be right back. Boom, move away, come back. Move away, come back. But don't hover for too long because it will prompt kids to say, I know, get out of here. When we talk about teaching and engaging kids, it's easy to engage kids when we're not in instruction. We can just talk about stuff. But once instruction starts, we have to be purposeful about that engagement. And so we've got all these ways to do that, things that we call opportunities to respond, OTRs. And we can do these in a number of ways. But the big idea is this. How often, while you're the one talking, are the kids getting opportunities to express themselves in some way? They could do it by holding up a thumb or down a thumb. They could do it by holding up fingers. They could do it by holding up a sign. They could just hold up a red card or a green card. You could talk to your neighbor. You could, and again, this is limited only by your imagination. And what we know is that at about 3 OTRs per minute, we get statistically significant increases in active kid engagement, which makes sense, but statistically significant decreases in disruptive behavior. But you don't need 3 OTRs per minute all day long. You need them during that time when you're the one delivering instruction. When you say, get with your group and do it, engagement's built into that. You don't need to do it. So we only need to do this when it isn't otherwise happening naturally. And that typically isn't a very long period. But during that little period, we really need to have those. I've got this video here that is from a real classroom I wanted to show you. This is from a sophomore classroom, and this would be the one we... sophomore classroom in Louisville. And they had a emergency certified teacher because nobody wanted to come work at this school and nobody was qualified to teach physics. So they hired this lady who had a physics background but had never taught. And they asked me, would you go stand in that room and hang out with her for a week? So I went. And so here she is. You don't see her in this yet, but this is this group of sophomores. She's teaching the Doppler effect, which is as interesting as it sounds. So these kids could care less. So watch while she talks. What I want you to pay attention to is how engaged the kids are or not.
Tyron, give me another. Wavelength. Then how do I measure a wavelength? What does this mean? So from where to where am I going to get a wavelength? Ladies and gentlemen, you should be listening to the person who's speaking. So Tyron, where do I measure?
Oh. Is this not turned on? This isn't plugged in. Thank you. Okay, so I know you couldn't hear that because it was shot on a thing called a flip camera back in the olden days, sitting way up in a corner. So she's showing them waves on the board and talking about the Doppler effect with sound waves. They don't care, and why would they? That's maybe the absolute least important thing they could possibly think of right now. But that is what has to be taught. So after class, she and I sat down and talked about it, and she said, they don't care about any of this. And I said, I know. That's our problem. That's a teaching problem. If kids aren't engaged, it has to be on us. There's nothing magic that makes them engaged. We've got to go get them. How do you go get them? And so we talked about it. She came up with this idea. First of all, the Doppler effect means sound is in waves. So if something is moving and making a sound, on the front of that thing that's moving, the sound waves get compressed and it makes a higher pitch. And on the back end, they get strung out and it makes a lower pitch, which is why a motorcycle coming towards you is going, and then it goes past you. It's the Doppler effect. So if you got nothing else out of today, you got the Doppler effect. So she took her phone, made it make a pitch, beep, stuck it in a bag, and just started swinging it over her head. And the pitch goes, wee, wee, wee. Without much introduction to this at all, she started doing that. And every kid in there's like, why are you doing that? Why is it making that noise? What's going on? She just got kids to ask her about the Doppler effect. It was amazing. But it was her thinking out, what do I need to do to grab these kids? Got to figure out something, because just saying, here's why you need to know the Doppler effect, I don't really know what the answer to that would be. We could probably demonstrate some of that in here. So how would it be possible for you?
That's a phone.
Oh no, she want to hit somebody with her phone in a bag.
Oh, listen. You hear one pitch.
Just all the same. It never really changes, but the way she spins it around her head, what makes it sound like it's changing? So they're all looking. I don't think they're all going, aha, the Doppler effect. They're not. But they're looking, they're asking questions. She's got her foot in the door. This kid, I will make a distinction about this. Off task inside the curriculum versus off task outside the curriculum. He's off task making ridiculous comments about what we're doing. What I want to do with a kid who's off task inside the curriculum is go right to them with a question. You're watching, you're listening because you're making a comment on it. Why do you think that happened? Don't talk about, I need you to be, he's in, he's watching, take advantage of that. It's different if he was off messing around somewhere else outside the curriculum. But that's the most engaged I've ever saw that kid. He was saying ridiculous things, but he was paying attention in his own way and needed to be taken advantage of. So I think we just have to keep thinking about, how do I get kids that maybe don't want to be got right now? Next, when we start talking about, or continue talking about classroom management, is positive reinforcement. And when I think of positive reinforcement in a school, this other random sign I found on the internet is exactly what I want people to think. Notice that this sign does not say you will be given points or goodies or tokens or privileges. It says, hey, we noticed you doing what you're supposed to do. That's it. That's where we are. Now, I'm not saying that you can't or shouldn't use points or tokens or things. What I'm saying is you don't need those in order to do positive reinforcement. Anytime you can affirm to a student, you did that right, that's where we are. And so, good teachers can do this so easily. A wink, a nod, a smile to a kid, a pat on the back, a thumbs up, and words. We want the words too, but all of those things need to be a part of what we're doing all the time. What we want to be saying to kids is, we've talked about what's right. You're doing it that way. Wow, good on you. But we can say that way simpler than that too. And of course, we want that behavior-specific praise, but that doesn't mean that every single time the kid does something, we got to run over there and give behavior-specific praise. But we do want to acknowledge it. Thank you is a really good one. Yes will work. So we just want to think about using this array of affirmations with kids as we see them doing the right thing. So I like to think about this in levels. Level 1 is me saying, you did the right thing. Level 2, access to privileges, but it's not what you think. We're not inventing privileges. They're already there. So here's an example. I was at a school one day. I was supposed to be doing an observation of a kid. This is like 6th grade. And all morning long, he's just an angel. Does nothing wrong. It was a great morning. Then the teacher says, let's go to the computer lab. They all get up. They go to the computer lab. And so you know what the computer lab looks like. It's got 30 identical computers. This kid gets in an argument with another kid about which computer they got. Again, they're all exactly the same as far as I can tell. But I thought, here's an opportunity. You know these kids want to pick which computer. Why not say, Lindsay, you had a great morning this morning. Why don't you take first pick on computer? I alleviate that problem that I see coming, but I also give a second layer of reinforcement. It's free. Especially if you're in elementary school, there are so many things during the day that kids, I want to be first in line. I want to be the one that gets to call the office. I want to be the one that, use those opportunities to give an extra layer to kids who otherwise might not be getting that. And I'm going to talk about differentiation here in just a second, because that's always the question. Public acknowledgement. We're at level 3. We're still not spending any money on anything. A certificate costs whatever a piece of paper costs. A picture on the wall, your name read on the announcements. And although I have worked in schools where there are kids that didn't want any of those things, everybody wants a note home to mom. That one is always going to be there. And again, it's free. I also like to think about the kids that we're thinking about when we think about behavior problems. Their parents probably don't get something good happened today notes very often, and I think it means a lot to them when those things do. So I think those are really important. Finally, token reinforcement. Points, token kinds of things, etc. So in all of my years as both a counselor and a teacher, we ran a full-blown token economy. You could earn them, you could lose them, you put them in the bank, you could spend them at the store, etc. So I'll say 2 things about that. 1, I hate a token economy. And 2, I would use it again in the same circumstances. I hate it because it's a pain. I got to keep track of the points and who's got what and when are they going to spend them and I got to stock the store. And at the same time, I knew it worked for those kids. But it's enough work that you don't want to use a token economy unless you need a token economy. Use your words. Use your acknowledgments. Stay away from that unless you need it. And if you don't work in a classroom with a lot of kids with more significant disabilities and especially behavior disorders, it's probably more work than it's worth for you. But there's no data that says it's a bad thing. It's just an onerous thing. So try to make your life easy. And what's the simplest thing I could do to have an effect? Increase the verbals. Well, how often do adults say something or gesture something positive to a kid? I can tell you because we've collected this data. We've been in 15,000 unique classrooms and coded what teachers and students do. If you ask teachers, they'll say, oh, probably 5 times a minute. At elementary school, it's 0.16 times per minute. And it drops precipitously through middle and to high. It's just like, it's gone. We don't do it. The effect size, if you follow effect sizes, for simply saying, yes, you did that right, is 0.97, which would put it in like the top 3 of all things we know of. As simple as saying, yes, you did that right, one of the most powerful things we've got, and we don't use it. It's just not something we do well as teachers, and nobody seems to know why, and we all talk about it, but it never really changes. That's just kind of where it sticks all the time. Now, let's talk about differentiation. I'm going to go over and say, Jessica, you know, we've been having some issues and I know you've really been struggling with this, tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to incentivize you. If you can get your work done for these 3 days, you've earned, and think whatever, it's something that every kid would think was a good deal. You've earned, you get to sit at the special table, you get to have double lunch, you get, don't go buy things. Make it something that fits into your curriculum, but it's something everybody would want. Why won't these guys all say, I do my work every day, how come I don't get that? That's not fair. That's the number one thing people will say to me. And my response is this. If you've never been given these guys accolades for what they are doing, the fact that you're finishing your work, that is going to happen. But I want to do this every day. I am so grateful that I have you guys in my class because you're the most responsible kids I've ever had. I don't think I've ever had more mature kids that just get their work done because they know it's the right thing. Then I make this deal over here with Jessica. You guys want nothing to do with this. We do it because we're responsible. He tells us every day. Now, I'm not telling you this is foolproof, but if you've blown other kids way up for doing these things, they're really not likely to want this. When we deal with kids that are severe behavior disorders, the way you do this is you put it into a level system. Or we say, you're on gold level. Gold level is the highest level we got. Your picture's up here on the wall for gold level. You get to do all these things. With my kids, this was literally the way it was. You get to go to the restroom without me. Jessica doesn't. So when I say to Jessica, you can get all this stuff, if one of them said that, I'd go, right, but you're on the gold level. You do that because you're responsible. That's why you get to go to the restroom by yourself. That's why. But it's the same concept that they have to understand the expectations from me are different because I'm better at this. I've been doing this. I feel good about myself. But the only way you can differentiate like that is if you're piling it on all the time to everybody. So that's really important to make that happen. So now some tricks. Start with the class-wide contingency. This one is where you'd say, if everybody in the class gets this done, we all get some sort of reward. Now here's what you have to be careful about. You can't use this to get kids to do something they can't do yet. You can only use this to have them do something you know they can do, but don't necessarily do. So this is for things we know they can do, but they're slow to do right now, so we're going to incentivize it. Second caveat. Kids can use this to get negative attention. I say, everybody gets this work done, we'll all get to watch this cool YouTube thing I found. And Carrie says, I don't care about your stupid YouTube thing, I'm not doing it because I don't want any of you guys to watch it either. And now what she's successfully done is sabotaged our group contingency and garnered a ton of negative attention. And you know Carrie, love her or hate her as long as you're thinking about her. So right now she got everyone to hate her and she's just soaking it in. If you've got those kinds of kids, you have to really think hard about doing this. There's a couple ways to do that. One is I'll go to Carrie ahead of time. I'm thinking about running this group thing where we can all get something. I'm not sure you'd want to participate, so I was just going to ask you up front whether you want to. And now she's realizing that if you say no, everybody else is going to do it anyway. This doesn't. So I'm giving you an option to opt out. And that seems to have worked fairly well. But what if you put it in place and Carrie does that? You opt her out. If she did it on purpose, you just opt her out. So if we all get this done, we all get, and then Carrie says her thing, they say, I know, Carrie, I know you wouldn't want to do this, so this didn't include you. And just keep going on as if nothing ever happened. I've done this and had the kid go like, what do you mean this doesn't include me? How come I don't want to? You just said you didn't want to do it. Yeah, I do. They really didn't want to be excluded. They wanted the attention. And so I don't want you ever to think, though, that we would set it up hoping that happened. Because what we just did was we responded to a failure and fixed it. But you don't ever want to set a program up where they have to fail before we can do something. So I would rather give her the opt-out ahead of time. Now what this teacher does, and this is a real teacher, science class at the high school, At the start of every class, he has these kids pair up and he gives them a certain number of minutes to each do something. And if they all get it done, they get, I think he's going to set something on fire or something. He's in a science class. But the idea is they do this every day. And so it's an icebreaker. It gets everybody's mind back into, I think this is chemistry, but it's also a group contingency.
Alright, so you're going to pick an element, and I want you to draw a Lewis dot structure for that element. And as a whole class, once I've discovered and found that 20 of you all have done different, correct Lewis dot structures, you'll have a demonstration for you at the end. But we've got to do this before the end of the period. Okay? So if when you're ready to be checked, I want you to raise your hand quietly, and I'll come around and check your work. Any questions? Go. Got our first one, we got carbon. I'll create a list up here so you can see which ones. I'm coming to Michael. Show it to me. Very good. We got hydrogen. There's another.
I turned the computer on.
Saria, what do you got? Show me. Lewis dot structures. Turn that into a Lewis dot structure. All right, that's number 18. We got fluorine down. We have 2 more. 2 minutes. 2 more. 2 minutes. Preston, what do you got? Lithium. Beautiful. 1 more. We got 1 minute left. Who's going to be the one that finishes it for us? There's lithium. November, I'm coming for you. What do we got? Perfect. We've got chlorine. That's number 20. And you all, I've got a cool demonstration for you. We're going to look at some flame tests. And it's going to be really awesome because I'm going to make flames and it's going to turn different colors and you're going to love it.
So instead of having to wander the room pestering kids, come on, get busy, the contingency was on the whole room. And he just keeps saying, we got how many minutes left? Oh, that flame test is going to be cool if you guys get it. And so it's all about everybody's in it together as a team trying to get this done. Much easier to do. If you're not a science teacher, flame tests are probably not what you'd want to use for your reinforcer. So I wanted to talk, I talked a little bit about prompting. I know we're just out of time, so I'm going to just go to my big ideas here. So 1, kid behavior is not going to change until adult behavior changes. That doesn't mean that it was our fault. But if a kid comes in my room and I say, what's 2 plus 2? And they say 5, if I don't do something different than what I've been doing, why would I think they won't say 5 again? And simply saying wrong doesn't mean they're going to say 4 tomorrow. It just means maybe they won't say 5. So we want to have adults do things to create differences for kids. Second, everything we do, I would argue that everything I've talked about today is part of effective instruction. I mean, the movement about the room, the eye contact, it's all about engagement. It's all about you and I having this communication, even if it's not verbal. And finally, a lot of being a teacher is tricks and traps. Finding ways to get kids to do something that makes them successful. And as teachers thinking about it, we have to realize some things work better than other things. And you got to pick and choose for different kids what things make the most sense. So, any questions?
I have a question.
Okay.
So we are a PBIS school, and we have matrices for behavior expectations in our building. And so they had us make a classroom behavior matrix to share with our kids and hang up in our room. So you were saying start with having them tell you like what they think that would look like, right? Like, so we have be responsible, be respectful, and communicate effectively. So you were saying like kind of prompt them, like, hey, what would being respectful look like when you first come into the classroom?
It will be far more effective if the kids come up with those ideas as part of a discussion about your anchor rather than simply listing. So I think of the matrix as your curriculum, you know.
We do go in the classroom and do a little video with the kids that are like.
Yeah, we do that, and we
And
have
so
like how,
do that.
how the school goals
Yeah.
fit into each.
And it does feel like a lot of like, we're just telling them. So my question was like, would it be effective, like we start out the year with our matrix? Could we have them like create our matrix?
I love that idea of basically saying, teach real hard your big ideas, your anchors, and then say, okay, in the classroom, and what goes on your other axis, locations or situations, context, whatever, just say, let's do the first one. What was your first one?
Be respectful.
Be respectful. What does that mean? Okay, let's go to this context right here, whatever this was on the axis. What kind of things should we be thinking about or doing, and have a discussion? Get with your shoulder partner and each one of you, and I'm going to point around and have you say things that you think would work and why. I'll tell you what they'll do. They'll come up with way more rules than you do. They really will. And you can say, let's combine those. These are all kind of the same. You can make it end up looking like exactly you thought it would in the first place by just doing that. But it is effective instruction rather than just simply presenting it. I think that's the way it should be done.